There's this moment from last Christmas that I keep replaying in my head, mostly because I never saw it coming. Not like that, not in front of everyone, and certainly not with that smug little smirk on her face, like she'd finally won something. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let me back up and tell you how we got there. My name's Riley, I'm 29, and if you were to meet me, you probably wouldn't guess what I do for a living. I've always kept things pretty low-key. I don't wear flashy clothes, I'm not big on social media, and I drive a nice car. Yeah, but not the kind that screams, "Look at me." It's more like, I worked hard for this and I enjoy driving it. I didn't grow up with money. Far from it. My dad left when I was 6, and my mom did everything she could to keep us afloat. My older brother, Jake, is 31, and while we were close as kids, something shifted after high school. He became obsessed with status, labels, brands, appearances. I remember he once used a month's rent on a designer belt just because some guy at a party said his clothes looked Walmart basic. That was kind of the turning point. Now here's the thing about Jake. He's got charm, no doubt. That smooth, social kind of charisma that makes people overlook red flags because he's just so fun. He always knew how to say the right thing at the right time, especially around family. And my Aunt Valerie, absolutely adored him. I think part of her always wanted a son like Jake. Sophisticated, polished, ambitious. She never really knew how to talk to me. I was too quiet, too bookish, and as she liked to say with a tight smile, very practical, just like your mother. That wasn't a compliment. To Aunt Valerie, my mom represented the struggle she wanted to distance herself from. Valerie married well. Her husband, Charles, came from old money. Nothing crazy, but enough to give her the lifestyle she always craved. And she wanted Jake to mirror that world. So when he started dressing the part and talking about networking and investing and manifesting his dream life, Valerie ate it up. She didn't know the half of it. Jake's business ventures were mostly smoke and mirrors, dropshipping schemes, crypto hustles, the occasional MLM he tried to rope me into and failed. Meanwhile, I was working brutal hours in tech, saving religiously, investing smartly, and eventually founded a SaaS company that took off. It wasn't overnight, and it wasn't sexy, but it was mine. I never told the family much about it. They never asked. They just assumed I was doing okay, and that was fine with me. But last Christmas, things reached a boiling point, and it all started with one look, one smirk, and one flashy car parked in the snow-covered driveway. See, last Christmas was the first time in a while that the entire extended family was getting together again. Aunt Valerie was hosting, of course. Her holiday parties were like mini galas, full of weirdly expensive cheese boards, string quartet playlists, and a dress code that wasn't explicitly stated but heavily implied. I pulled into the driveway a few minutes late, as usual, in my car. A midnight blue McLaren 720S. I debated driving something else, maybe renting a sedan just to avoid the questions, but I was tired of hiding. Not because I wanted to brag. I just didn't want to shrink anymore. I parked near the front walkway, figuring I'd move it if someone needed the space. When I walked in, the warmth of the house hit me first, roasting turkey, cinnamon, pine from the massive tree in the foyer. Then came the noise. Laughter, chatter, clinking glasses. The usual holiday chaos. I found my mom in the kitchen, helping Valerie with some tray of puff pastries. She looked a little flustered, but happy to see me. Valerie barely acknowledged me, offering a distracted, "Oh, you made it," without looking up. Jake arrived 10 minutes later with a scarf around his neck and that confident glide in his step. The moment he entered, the energy shifted. Valerie turned into a giddy teenager. "Jake, oh, darling, you look amazing," she beamed, giving him an air kiss. I watched from the hallway, already predicting how the night would unfold. Jake started making his rounds, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, complimenting everyone's outfits like he was some kind of royalty. Then, as I sipped my drink quietly in the corner of the living room, I saw her walk in. A girl. Blonde, tall, model type. Beautiful, clearly a guest. And she was with Valerie, not Jake. That got my attention. Valerie had her hand on the girl's back, guiding her toward the center of the room like she was showing off a new painting. "Everyone, this is Lila," she announced. "She's just lovely. Jake, come meet her. I think you two will get along wonderfully." There it was. That little smirk. Like she was orchestrating something. Jake, of course, turned on the charm. "Well, now, This party just got a whole lot more interesting, he said, offering Lila his hand. Lila blushed and smiled, clearly flattered. Valerie stood back, sipping her wine with satisfaction like a puppeteer watching her marionettes dance. That's when she said it. Casually, almost offhand, but loud enough for the room to hear. And of course, Lila, I'm sure you noticed the car out front. That's Jake's. He's done so well for himself. There was a pause. A moment where everyone glanced at me. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way I smiled, just barely. But I saw it. The tension. I put down my glass, walked over, and said it just loud enough, just clearly enough, with that same tight smile Valerie always used on me. Oh, by the way, that car's mine, not his. The room went quiet. Not dramatically. Just that strange kind of stillness that happens when something shifts and no one knows what to say next. Lila blinked. Jake's smile faltered. Valerie's face froze. And that was just the beginning. I won't lie. Watching Aunt Valerie's expression twist like that, kinda satisfying. She tried to recover fast, but it was too late. The words had already sunk in. The silence hung heavy for a beat too long. Then my cousin Harper nervously laughed and said, "Oh wow, Riley, didn't know you were into cars like that." I gave a small shrug and said, "Yeah, it's a fun one. Got it about a year ago." I wasn't trying to make a scene. I swear I wasn't. But something in me, maybe years of being sidelined at every family event, finally decided it didn't want to sit quietly in the corner anymore. And judging by Jake's flushed cheeks and clenched jaw, I'd touched a nerve. He tried to salvage the moment with a chuckle. Well, technically, I helped Riley test drive a few models. He leaned on me for advice. Not true. Jake doesn't know a McLaren from a Mazda. But Valerie latched on instantly. Yes, well, you always had such an eye for the finer things, Jake. And just like that, they pivoted, trying to steer the conversation away from the embarrassing reality that her golden boy wasn't the one with the supercar. I let it go, for that moment. But something had shifted in the air. I saw it in the way Valerie kept glancing at me during dinner, like I was an unruly guest who had the nerve to speak without raising his hand. I saw it in Jake's increasingly forced laughter as he told stories that didn't quite land. And I saw it in Lila, her curiosity. She ended up sitting next to me at the dinner table, which clearly hadn't been part of Valerie's original seating plan. "So what do you do, Riley?" Lila asked as we passed around some overly sculpted cranberry dish. I gave her the short version: tech startup, software tools, automation for small businesses. "That sounds kind of brilliant," she said, sounding genuinely interested. "I've been trying to build a side hustle and always get stuck on the logistics." We chatted a bit. Nothing flirty, just easy conversation. But that didn't sit well with Jake. I could feel his eyes on us the entire time, even as he pretended to joke with our cousin on the other end of the table. Later, while dessert was being passed around, some artisanal pear tart that looked like it belonged in a museum, I stepped into the hallway to take a call. One of my partners needed a quick update on a server migration we had queued. 5 minutes tops. When I came back, I found Jake standing with Lila near the fireplace, speaking low but animated. She looked uncomfortable, arms crossed, and when she saw me, her face lit up a little. "There you are," she said quickly, walking toward me. "Jake was just telling me that you, do back-end work for his company?" I blinked. "His company?" Jake came up behind her, smiling with all his teeth. "Yeah, you know, technically, I gave Riley the first idea for his product. He just ran with it, so I like to say we're kind of co-founders. Right, bro?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and he wasn't joking. Not really. He wanted this narrative. He needed it. I turned to Lila. "That's not true," I said calmly. "He didn't help build anything. We had one lunch 2 years ago where he said I should make an app like Tinder for dog walkers. That's about as far as his input went." Jake's eyes flared. "Come on, man, it was a joke. Why are you being so dramatic?" Lila raised an eyebrow, then glanced between us. "Wow. Okay. Bit of a different story there." She turned and wandered back toward the dining room. I followed at a slower pace, but before I could get far, Jake grabbed my arm, not hard, but enough to get my attention. "You trying to embarrass me, huh?" he hissed, his voice low. I pulled my arm back. "You did that all on your own." That was the moment. The one where things cracked open. I saw it in his face. This wasn't just about the car, or Lila, or even the company. It was about years. Years of pretending he was ahead, while I quietly built a life he couldn't fake his way into. And now he couldn't stand that the illusion was falling apart. Not in front of Valerie. Not in front of Lila. Not in front of the whole family who had worshipped the version of him they thought they knew. For the next few hours, he avoided me. Valerie didn't. She kept finding little ways to jab. I guess some people measure success in engines, she said at one point, sipping wine. Others in how they carry themselves. I just smiled. I knew her game, and I wasn't going to play defense anymore. A few days after Christmas, I got a call from my mom. She sounded hesitant. Sweetheart, did you tell anyone about that condo you're looking at? I hadn't. Not really. Just a quick mention to my cousin Harper in passing that I was thinking of buying something downtown, closer to work. Why? I asked. Mom sighed. Because Valerie told everyone at brunch today that Jake was buying a new penthouse next month, and she described the one you showed me pictures of, down to the marble kitchen island. I sat down, stunned. What? She said Jake was just waiting for the final paperwork. That he's been working on a quiet acquisition. Riley, she said it like it was already his. It was surreal. Like I was watching someone rewrite my life in real time and hand it to my brother as a gift. I wanted to believe it was just a weird misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Jake had done this before. Small lies that blurred into big ones. And with Valerie egging him on, it had always worked. Until now. I tried to ignore it. I focused on work. Pushed through the end-of-year chaos. But then came the real betrayal. Mid-January, I got a message from one of my clients, a small but steady business I'd helped automate invoicing for. The owner was friendly, kind of old school, and we'd built a great rapport. His email was polite but firm. Hi Riley, I'm a bit confused. We received an outreach from someone named Jake claiming to represent your company, offering to take over our services at a discounted executive rate. Just wanted to check if this is legit. My heart dropped. I called the client immediately, and after a quick conversation, it was clear Jake had contacted not just them, but at least 2 others, pretending to be part of my company, offering deals, dropping my name, using phrases he must have picked up from me at family dinners or snooping through old emails when I'd left my laptop open during a visit. It wasn't just annoying. It was dangerous, legally and professionally. I confronted him, of course. Texted first. No answer. Called. Straight to voicemail. Finally, I showed up at his apartment. He opened the door shirtless, holding a protein shake, like it was any normal Wednesday. What's up, bro? He said, far too casually. I didn't bother with small talk. You impersonated me to my clients. That's fraud. Jake blinked, then laughed. Calm down. I was just trying to bring in more business. You should be thanking me. By lying? By offering fake deals. He shrugged. You've got plenty. Why not share the wealth a little? And that was it. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about jealousy or pride. This was about entitlement. Jake truly believed he deserved what I had, without doing the work. And he was willing to cross any line to get it. But what hurt more, what burned in my chest like acid, was knowing Valerie would probably defend him. Again, just like always. And I was right. When I told her what happened, she didn't even pretend to be shocked. You two have always been competitive, she said with a sigh. Jake just admires you, Riley. Maybe if you were a little more inclusive, he wouldn't feel the need to do these things. Inclusive, like I owed him access to everything I'd built. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, the city lights flickering outside my window, and thought about all the times I'd bitten my tongue. All the years I'd been quiet, respectful, patient, and all the times they'd used that silence to step over me, to rewrite my story. And in that moment, something hardened inside me. I wasn't going to let them keep writing chapters in a book that wasn't theirs. That's when I started planning, not out of anger, but clarity. And what happened next? Well, let's just say Christmas won't be the only holiday they remember for a very long time. But we're not there yet. The weeks after that confrontation were rough. I thought I'd be more angry, furious, even, but what I felt was heavier than that. I felt hollow, like something had been scraped out of me and replaced with this dull ache I couldn't shake. I still went to work, kept up with clients, led meetings, and smiled through check-ins with my team. But beneath it all, I was tired. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. Tired of the games. Tired of the manipulations. Tired of being pulled into some performance where I played the quiet one, the responsible one, the guy who always let it slide. And for what? So my own brother could skim off the top of my life like it was his buffet? After the client incident, I had to do damage control, quietly, professionally, without making Jake's actions public, because the last thing I needed was legal drama or questions about my company's internal security. I informed the clients he contacted that he had no affiliation with us. I updated our contracts, added stricter NDAs for future partnerships, changed a few logins just in case. But even as I handled it all calmly, efficiently, I could feel the weight of it starting to settle in. It wasn't just business. It was personal. Deeply, bitterly personal. I didn't tell my mom everything. Just the broad strokes. I knew she'd worry, and honestly, I didn't want to make her choose between her sons. She'd always try to stay neutral, even when it was clear who was in the wrong. That was her way. Keep the peace. Avoid the drama. Sometimes I admired her for it. Other times, it frustrated me to no end. I started pulling back from the family after that. Slowly, quietly, declined a few weekend invites. Skipped a cousin's birthday party. I needed space, not just from Jake and Valerie, but from the entire structure that had enabled them. And I didn't explain myself, which, apparently, was the worst thing I could have done, because silence leaves a vacuum, and vacuums get filled with rumors. I started hearing things secondhand, that I was burning bridges, that I was too good for the family now, that I couldn't handle a little competition. Classic gaslighting, wrapped in concern, tied with a ribbon of passive aggression. But I stayed quiet. I stayed focused. And beneath that quiet, I was building. I knew I needed to evolve, not just professionally, but personally. For years, I'd been the guy behind the curtain, the builder, the doer, the problem solver. I wasn't flashy, and I didn't care about recognition. But maybe, just maybe, that invisibility had been part of the problem. Not because I needed praise, but because it made it too easy for people like Jake to step into the spotlight and claim the stage I'd constructed with my own two hands. So I started working on something new. A side project, technically. A tool I'd been sketching out for over a year, but never found the time to pursue. It was meant to help creators manage digital rights, contracts, usage permissions, distribution licenses, all in one intuitive platform. I called it ClearFrame. And in those early months of rebuilding myself, ClearFrame became my lifeline. I poured everything into it. Late nights, early mornings, obsessively refining the UI, testing prototypes, sending drafts to a small circle of beta users. The feedback was promising. Not just cool app comments, but real enthusiasm. Where was this 6 months ago? One user wrote. I lost a client because we misunderstood our usage clause. I also hired a PR consultant, my first time doing that. She specialized in helping startups build public-facing narratives, and she pushed me to do something I'd never done before, step out of the shadows. You're the founder, she said one afternoon on Zoom, adjusting her glasses with a smirk. Start acting like it. She helped me build a personal site, polish my LinkedIn, and prepare a few podcast appearances. And to my surprise, I liked it. Not the attention necessarily, but the clarity, the sense of ownership, the feeling of finally standing in the center of my own story. Meanwhile, the distance from my family kept growing. Jake texted me once, in February. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he did. Just a vague, hope things are cool. Want to grab a beer sometime? I didn't respond. Valerie emailed me the following week. It was a long message that somehow managed to sound both concerned and condescending at the same time. She wrote about how family bonds are sacred, how resentment only breeds more pain, and how Jake is willing to forgive and forget if you are. That last part got me. Like he was the one extending the olive branch. I didn't reply to her either. Instead, I booked a ticket to a tech conference in Lisbon. It was my first time attending one in person since before the pandemic, and it felt symbolic, like closing a door on one chapter and stepping into another. The conference was electric. I met creators, founders, developers, investors, people who got it, who didn't care about family drama or who said what at Christmas, people who cared about ideas, execution, integrity. I pitched ClearFrame to a few folks, got a lot of interest, even landed a meeting with a VC firm that had backed 2 companies I'd admired for years. It was surreal, and for the first time in a long time, I felt good, not smug, not vindicated, just solid, grounded, like I wasn't building to prove anything. I was building because it mattered, because it was mine. One night, after a long day of meetings and panels, I sat on the rooftop of my hotel with a glass of wine and just breathed. Lisbon glowed beneath me. Warm. Alive. And I thought about the kid I used to be. The one who sat quietly in the corner at family dinners, watching Jake get praised for things he didn't do. I thought about the years I spent making myself smaller to keep the peace, to avoid rocking the boat. And then I thought, never again. When I flew home, everything looked a little different. The city, my apartment, even myself in the mirror. I'd changed. Not in some dramatic, Hollywood way. Just quietly. Fundamentally. I felt strong. But strength doesn't erase the past. And when March rolled around, the past came knocking. Mom called, nervous again. Honey, I think you should come to Easter this year. Just for an hour. I know things have been tense, but your cousin Chloe's coming back from overseas, and your grandma's been asking about you every day. I hesitated. I know you're angry, she continued gently. And I don't blame you. But don't let Jake take more from you than he already has. That hit me hard. Mom rarely acknowledged the imbalance so directly. And maybe she was right. Maybe staying away gave them more power, not less. So I said yes. 1 hour, I told myself. No drama. Just show up, hug grandma, say hi to Chloe, and bounce. But of course, it didn't go that way. Easter was at Valerie's house again. Same curated decor, same Pinterest-level food spread, same background music that sounded like it came from an overpriced spa. I wore a navy blazer, jeans, and my quiet confidence. Pulled up in a rental, not the McLaren. I didn't want the distraction. My grandma lit up when she saw me. Chloe nearly tackled me with a hug. Even my mom looked relieved. For the first 20 minutes, it was actually okay. Tense, but manageable. Then Jake walked in. He was wearing a tan suit that looked like it was tailored for someone 3 inches taller. Next to him, Lila. Yeah, that Lila. She smiled at me politely, but there was a weird tightness to it. Like we were both remembering that conversation by the fireplace months ago, but weren't sure if we were allowed to acknowledge it. Jake strutted in like he owned the place. And within minutes, he was holding court again, bragging about his latest venture, talking about meetings with industry insiders. When someone asked for specifics, he hand-waved them away. Confidential stuff, you know how it is. Then Valerie chimed in. Jake's also been working with some great new tech clients. Word is, he's stepping into a partner role with a company that's about to go global. She said it with that same smirk from Christmas. And just like that, the air shifted again. I felt it deep in my gut, because I knew what she was doing, and I knew what was coming next. Jake turned toward the center of the room and raised his glass. Actually, he said, I'd love to make a little announcement. I froze. Mom looked at me, confused. Valerie beamed, and I braced myself, because whatever he was about to say next, I knew it was going to cross a line I couldn't ignore. And this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. The glass in Jake's hand caught the afternoon light as he held it high, his voice rising just enough to command the room. All conversation died down. Forks paused halfway to mouths. I stood by the archway between the kitchen and living room, one hand in my pocket, the other clenching a chilled glass of water I hadn't touched in 10 minutes. I didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Jake was glowing. Or trying to, anyway. That artificial confidence that's just a little too polished. Too forced. I'm thrilled to share that I've officially accepted a partnership with a brilliant up-and-coming tech company, he said, letting the words hang like mistletoe in the air. We're building something massive, something that's going to reshape how small businesses operate. We're looking at a multi-million-dollar valuation in the next 18 months. Aunt Valerie clapped lightly. A few cousins whistled. Grandma nodded approvingly, though I doubt she fully understood what he was talking about. I stood perfectly still. Jake wasn't done. You'll probably see our name soon in Forbes and a couple other media outlets. But I wanted you all to hear it here first from me. I knew that tone. That smug, self-satisfied inflection he used when he just told a lie so big it could only be swallowed whole if he said it with confidence. What stunned me wasn't the gall. It was the name he dropped next. We're called Clearframe, he added, like he'd just casually invented it yesterday. It's still in stealth mode, but you'll all be seeing a lot more of us soon. I swear I felt the air punch out of my lungs. I hadn't told the family the name of my new startup. Not once. Not even in passing. The only place he could have gotten it was through snooping, either from an old pitch deck on my desktop the last time he was over or from stalking one of my early investor meetings, maybe even using someone else's login. My jaw tensed. He'd not only stolen my company's name, he'd announced it publicly, in front of the family, as if it were his. There was a moment of silence after he finished. Aunt Valerie beamed like a proud stage mom. Lila looked vaguely uncomfortable. My mother turned her head slowly toward me. I didn't blink. I didn't even flinch. But inside, something snapped. This wasn't just lying. This was identity theft. This was reputation theft. And the timing couldn't have been worse or better, depending on how you looked at it. Because what Jake didn't know was that 2 weeks earlier, Clearframe had finalized a strategic partnership with a very well-known software firm. It wasn't public yet, but we were days away from the rollout. Press releases had already been drafted. Product demos recorded. I had interviews lined up, podcasts queued, social posts scheduled. Once we went live, the digital footprint would be undeniable. There'd be no way to rewrite the narrative once that happened. Unless Jake was trying to jump in first. He was trying to get ahead of it. Plant a flag in the family's collective memory, so when they saw my name tied to it, they'd think he had something to do with it. So he could say, "Yeah, that's the company I told you about," and take credit for my work in a sleazy, slippery way that wouldn't hold up in court, but would be impossible to erase from casual conversation. I didn't say a word. Not yet. Instead, I quietly left the room, walked into the hallway, and sat down on the bottom step of the staircase with my phone. I opened my investor Slack group and sent a single message. "Remember the guy I told you about? He just publicly claimed ownership of Clearframe at a family event. I need that press package live by Monday. First thing. And we're doing the rollout our way." The replies came instantly. "Copy that." He seriously did that? What a psycho. "I'll move the articles up in the queue. Want to record a CEO spotlight video tonight?" Yes. Yes, I did. That night, after the party wound down, I declined dessert and said I had a meeting. No one stopped me. But Jake smirked as I walked past. "Good luck with your back-end coding, bro," he said, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Don't forget to thank me when Clearframe goes public." I stopped, turned, smiled. "Oh, don't worry. You'll be part of the story." He didn't get it. Not yet. But he would. When I got home, I didn't even take off my shoes. I dropped my keys, threw on a clean shirt, set up my camera, and hit record. It wasn't scripted. It didn't need to be. I spoke from the heart. I introduced myself as the founder of Clearframe. I talked about why I built it, who it was for, the years of quiet work that went into the idea. I mentioned the partnerships we were rolling out, the team behind the scenes, the vision, the mission, the story. It was clear, authentic, personal, and it was mine. We sent it to every outlet we'd lined up. We posted it across our startup socials. My PR manager even arranged a feature in an upcoming tech digest. It all went live Monday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. By 8:03, it was trending on LinkedIn. By 8:10, my inbox was full of congratulations. By 8:30, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I didn't answer. At 9 o'clock, Jake texted me. "WTF did you just do?" I left it on read. But I wasn't done. Because I didn't want just my version of the truth out there. I wanted his lies exposed. Publicly, clearly, with receipts. So I did what any good strategist does. I documented everything. Every screenshot. Every text. Every instance where Jake tried to blur the lines between his fantasies and my reality. And then I called in a favor from a friend I'd helped years ago with some back-end infrastructure. He ran a YouTube channel about tech drama, scams, fake startups, hustle bro grifters. I sent him the entire package and let him decide if it was worth telling. Spoiler, it was. He called it, "How a Fake Tech Bro Tried to Steal His Brother's Startup and Got Caught in 4K. He blurred names and faces, kept things legally clean, but the story was unmistakable. People online aren't stupid. The context, the screenshots, the Easter brunch detail, it didn't take long before people put the pieces together. Jake had wanted to ride the coattails of my success without doing the work. Instead, he became a cautionary tale. But here's the thing. I wasn't trying to ruin him. I just wanted him out of my shadow. Jake had always thrived in the gray area. Half-truths, unspoken assumptions, social manipulation. So I turned on the lights. And that's when everything began to crumble. I heard from Mom a few days later. Her voice shook when she asked, "Did you really build all that by yourself?" "Yes," I said simply. She didn't say much after that. Just that she was proud. That she was sorry she didn't see it sooner. But the best part? The absolute best moment? A week later, I got a LinkedIn message from Lila. "Hey, just saw the Clearframe rollout. Amazing work. Also, that brunch was wild. Hope you're doing okay." I smiled, typed a polite reply, and then I got back to work. Because revenge doesn't always come with screaming or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes with silence, with receipts, with truth, broadcast loud enough to drown out every lie that came before it. But I wasn't done yet, because Jake was still out there, and he still had one more card to play, and I was ready for it. Jake never knew how to lose quietly. Even as the ground crumbled beneath him, he kept grasping for something, anything, to hold on to. After the Clearframe launch went public and the YouTube expose gained traction, I expected backlash, maybe even confrontation. But I underestimated just how deeply Jake had convinced himself he was invincible, that he could keep lying his way forward as long as he smiled and talked fast enough. What I didn't expect was the audacity of his next move. About 2 weeks after the video dropped, I got a call from my lawyer. "Riley," she said calmly, "we received a cease and desist letter from someone named Jacob Trent." I almost laughed. "You're joking." "I wish I were. He's accusing you of defamation. Claims you stole his intellectual property, which he supposedly shared with you in a private brainstorming session." I had to sit down. It was bold, desperate, but not unexpected. Jake had no concept of consequences. He thought everything was a negotiation, that if he pressed hard enough, I'd fold, that I'd back down to avoid public mess. But I'd played the long game. I'd documented everything. The dates, the pitches, the filings, the trademark application, the IP registration. My company had airtight logs showing years of development, drafts, internal messages, version control, and meeting notes. We had a receipt trail longer than a CVS coupon. So I didn't just defend myself. I went on offense. My lawyer and I drafted a response that was calm, professional, and absolutely brutal. We included our legal documentation, the timeline of events, and screenshots of Jake's attempts to poach clients and impersonate a partner. We submitted our own cease and desist, legally binding, backed by counsel, and filed formally. And just to make sure the message landed, I instructed our PR manager to release a second press package. This one wasn't about the product. It was about integrity. The article was titled, "Building a Startup in the Age of Scammers: Why Truth Matters More Than Ever." It never named Jake directly. It didn't have to. But it outlined the growing trend of impersonation and entitlement in the startup world, especially from wannabe entrepreneurs who think charisma can replace code. It ended with a message about resilience, about standing firm when someone tries to take what you've built. It hit LinkedIn like a thunderclap. Within a day, the comments flooded in. Support, admiration, other founders sharing similar stories. And amid all that, silence from Jake. He'd gone radio silent. But behind the scenes, he wasn't done. I got word from a friend, someone Jake had tried to impress once at a networking event, that Jake was telling people I'd fabricated everything, that I was the one with the grudge, that I'd smeared him out of jealousy. It didn't matter, because lies only work when no one checks the facts. And by now, everyone was checking. He lost his consulting gig, one he'd gotten through a college friend who saw the video and put the pieces together. He got dropped from 2 speaking panels he'd never earned in the first place. And Lila? She left him. She never made it public, never made a scene. She just disappeared from his socials and reappeared in mine weeks later with a simple message. "Guess you really were the builder." I didn't respond to her romantically. That wasn't what this was about. But it felt good. Not because I won her, but because truth eventually speaks louder than charm. Valerie, on the other hand, didn't go quietly. She called my mother in a fury, demanding answers. Why would Riley humiliate Jake like this? Why couldn't he let it go? They're brothers. She was livid. My mom listened, quietly, then said something I'll never forget. "Maybe you should have taught Jake to stop taking things that weren't his." That was the end of it. I never heard from Valerie again. But my favorite part, the most poetic piece of this whole mess, came 6 weeks later. Jake tried to launch his own company. I got an email alert from a name I didn't recognize, some half-baked domain using buzzwords like synergy and disruption. But I knew it was him. It was always him. He had slapped together a website with vague language, an AI-generated logo, and a fake team of stock photo employees. And what did he call this new venture? Frameline. I laughed, out loud, alone in my apartment. It was so transparent, so desperate. He couldn't even come up with a name that wasn't a cheap knockoff of the very company he tried to steal. My legal team took care of it in under 48 hours. trademark infringement, intellectual property violation, domain takedown requests. We moved faster than he expected. By the third day, the website was down. The LinkedIn page had been removed. His Gmail account associated with the project was suspended. And just like that, Frameline ceased to exist. But I wasn't done yet. Because revenge, true revenge, isn't about destruction. It's about education. So I reached out to my old college. I'd been invited to speak at their entrepreneurship series before, but always turned it down. This time, I said yes. And I told them I wanted to talk about ethics and entrepreneurship. The auditorium was packed. Students, professors, a few local founders. I gave a talk titled, "What Happens When Someone Tries to Steal Your Startup, and Why You Let the Work Speak for Itself." I never said Jake's name, but I didn't need to. I told the full story, scrubbed of personal identifiers, focused on the principles, not the pettiness. The audience was riveted. And at the end, during the Q&A, one kid stood up and asked, "What would you say to the person who tried to take credit for your company?" I smiled, looked out over the sea of faces. "I'd say thank you," I said, because they reminded me that silence isn't always strength. Sometimes you have to stand up and say, "This is mine." Not to hurt someone else, but to protect what you built, to protect your story. And once you do that, no one can rewrite it without your permission. The room erupted in applause. And that was the end of it. Jake faded, quietly. Like a bad rumor, people stopped believing. He moved to another city, tried to start fresh. But the internet has a long memory. And every time he tried to rebrand, someone would eventually find the video, or the article, or the remnants of Frameline. Meanwhile, Clearframe kept growing. We expanded into Europe, partnered with 2 major platforms, hired our 50th employee by the end of the year. And I finally stopped apologizing for what I built. Because here's the thing. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be cruel. Sometimes, it's just telling the truth in a way that can't be undone, and watching the liars sink in their own silence. Jake once smirked at a dinner table, hoping I'd keep quiet. He never expected I'd be the one writing the ending. But I did. And here it is.